The assignment that changed. Everything I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I always thought hauntings were just stories people told to make sense of the unexplainable. Echoes of fear passed down through generations. But that changed the night I was sent to document the haunted remains of an old battlefield. A place where the dead refused to rest. It started as a simple assignment. I'm a freelance war historian and videographer. My work usually involves filming abandoned sites, old bunkers, and forgotten trenches for documentaries. So, when a small production company reached out, asking me to record footage at the Raven S Hollow battlefield, the site of one of the bloodiest and least documented skirmishes of World War II, I accepted immediately. The location was deep in the countryside, several miles from the nearest town. Most locals refused to go near it, claiming strange sounds and lights appeared there at night. According to them, soldiers still marched across the fields when the moon was full, their souls unable to leave the war behind. I laughed it off, of course. Folklore, I told myself. Just old village stories meant to scare children. But even as I packed my camera and drone, something about this trip felt different. There was a heaviness in my chest, a quiet dread that I couldn't shake. Still, I brushed it off as excitement, the kind you get before every new adventure. I arrived at Raven's Hollow just before sunset. The land stretched wide and silent, covered in mist that clung low to the ground like smoke. The air smelled of rust and rain. The trees that bordered the field were blackened, their branches twisted as if frozen mid-scream. I parked my Jeep beside a crumbling monument, a stone slab etched with the names of hundreds of soldiers. Most of the lettering had eroded, leaving only a few readable words. For the fallen who never returned. Setting up my equipment, I noticed how the place seemed trapped in time. No birds, no insects, no sound at all, just the soft hum of the wind passing through the tall grass. I spoke into my camera, documenting the scene. Day 1, Raven's Hollow. No visible activity yet, though the silence here feels unnatural. The words felt strange as they left my mouth, but I forced a chuckle. I guess ghosts don't like showing up for the camera. By nightfall, fog had swallowed the entire field. My flashlight beam barely cut through it. I decided to take a few drone shots before heading back. As the drone ascended, my monitor flickered. Static, then a flash of light. For a brief second, I thought I saw something moving across the screen. A line of figures, barely visible through the fog, walking in formation. Soldiers. I blinked, then it was gone. I replayed the footage. Nothing. Just mist and grass. Still, the chill running through me wouldn't go away. I powered down my equipment and decided to camp out in my Jeep for the night. But sleep never came. Around midnight, I heard it. Faint, rhythmic sounds coming from the field. Thud, 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 like boots hitting the ground in perfect sync. My first thought was that someone else was out there, maybe pranksters trying to mess with me. But when I stepped out, the air turned icy. My breath hung in front of me like smoke. The sound grew louder, closer. I scanned the fog with my flashlight, heart hammering. That's when I heard whispers. Not voices from one direction, but many. Men murmuring, calling names I didn't recognize. Orders being shouted in a language I barely understood. I froze, every instinct screaming to run. And then, through the fog, I saw movement. Shadows. Dozens of them, walking slowly across the field. I could make out the faint outline of helmets, rifles, and tattered uniforms. The figures marched in silence, their boots never touching the ground, their faces hidden beneath the mist. My light flickered, and in that brief flash, one of them turned, directly toward me. For a second, our eyes met. His face was pale, streaked with dirt and blood, his eyes hollow yet pleading. And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. The fog swallowed everything. I stood there for what felt like hours, paralyzed. When I finally stumbled back to my Jeep, I could barely breathe. My camera had stopped recording. The battery, which had been full moments before, was completely drained. Before I started the engine, I looked back at the battlefield one last time. The fog was clearing, but in the distance I could still see faint, flickering lights, like lanterns swaying in the darkness. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I had just witnessed history or the ghosts of those who never left it behind. The whispering wind. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them again. The soldiers in the fog, the hollow eyes staring through me. When the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I convinced myself it had to be exhaustion. Maybe the mind plays tricks when you're surrounded by silence and history. Still, I couldn't ignore the weight pressing on my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity. Something deep inside me whispered that what I saw wasn't a hallucination, and I needed proof. After a few hours of rest, I picked up my camera and walked back toward the field. The morning air was cool but strangely still. Not a single breeze stirred the tall grass. The fog had retreated, revealing deep scars in the earth. Trenches, old ones, their edges collapsed, filled with water and weeds. I set up my tripod near one of them and began recording. Day 2, Raven's Hollow, I said into the mic. Strange events occurred last night, visual anomalies, possibly light reflections or fog distortions. Returning to verify. I was trying to sound professional, but my voice trembled just enough to betray me. As I filmed, I noticed something odd. The wind began to shift, a low, steady current blowing across the field. It wasn't cold exactly, but it carried a faint sound. A whisper. I paused, pulling off my headphones. The sound grew clearer. At first, it was only a murmur, like distant voices carried on the breeze. But then, I began to make out words, fragmented, fading in and out of the air. Hold the line. Don't let them through. They're coming. The voices overlapped, frantic and desperate. I turned toward the sound, scanning the field. No one, just grass swaying as if stirred by unseen movement. Then, from behind me, another whisper. Soft, almost at my ear. Do you hear them too? I spun around. No one was there. My heart pounded against my ribs. I backed away, gripping the camera like a weapon, every muscle tense. The air grew heavier, thicker, the way it does before a storm. But there were no clouds, no thunder, just that wind, whispering names I couldn't understand. One name, though, came through clearly. Elias. It repeated over and over. Elias. Elias. Until the word dissolved into the wind. I checked my recorder. Nothing. The microphone hadn't picked up a single sound, only the soft hum of static. That made no sense. I'd heard it with my own ears. Determined to capture something, anything, I followed the direction the wind had come from. About half a mile from the main field, I found a line of rusted helmets half buried in the soil, their metal eaten by decades of decay. Next to them were faded fragments of fabric, military coats, belts, and badges too old to identify. It hit me then. I was standing on what might have been a mass grave. I dropped to one knee, brushing dirt away from a piece of metal shaped like a dog tag. The inscription was faint, but I could still read the name. Elias Ward. My blood ran cold. That was the name I'd just heard whispered in the wind. Suddenly, the air around me shifted again. The wind picked up, stronger now, circling me in uneven gusts. My camera began to shake on its tripod. Then came the sound of boots, faint, then louder, as if a company of soldiers was marching through the field once more. But there was no one, only the sound. I shouted into the emptiness, "Who's there? Show yourself." For a moment, everything went silent. The air stilled completely, and then a voice, calm, low, and sorrowful, whispered back, "Help us." It came from right behind me. I turned, but all I saw was a cloud of dust swirling in the air, forming for a split second into the vague outline of a man in uniform. then scattering with the wind. I stumbled backward, tripping over a mound of earth. When I hit the ground, my camera fell beside me. The screen flickered with static. Then a brief image appeared. Soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, staring into the lens, eyes hollow, expressions frozen in despair. Then, darkness. When I woke, the sky had turned orange. I was lying in the same spot, my camera a few feet away, recording nothing but the sound of rustling grass. The whispers were gone. The air was still again. I picked up the camera and whispered, "Elias, if you're still out there, I heard you." A breeze stirred for just a moment, brushing past my face like a gentle touch, and then it was gone. That night I realized this was no ordinary haunting. The whispers weren't trying to scare me. They were reaching out, asking for something. And I was beginning to fear that before this was over, I'd find out exactly what. Shadows in uniform. I didn't leave Raven's Hollow that night. I couldn't. Something about the voice, that desperate whisper calling for help, made it impossible to walk away. It wasn't fear keeping me there anymore. It was purpose. Whatever haunted that field wasn't just trapped, it was begging to be heard. After sunset, the battlefield looked completely different. The world turned gray under the weight of fog, and the air felt thick, charged with electricity. I set my camera near the same trench where I'd found the dog tag. The engraved name, Elias Ward, still echoed in my mind. I turned on the camera and whispered, "Elias, if you're here, I want to understand." Silence. Then, the wind shifted. Slow at first, then steady. My light flickered, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Shadows gliding across the mist. I froze. At first, I thought it was the fog playing tricks again, but as the shapes grew clearer, I realized they had form. Shoulders, helmets, and weapons slung across their backs. Soldiers. Dozens of them. They walked in a silent procession, their boots barely touching the ground, moving in perfect unison like ghosts bound to an endless march. Their uniforms were tattered, soaked in mud and dried blood. Some carried rifles. Others dragged limp limbs as if the wounds that killed them had never healed. I crouched low behind a collapsed bunker, my camera trembling in my hands. Through the viewfinder, the scene looked unreal. Figures glowing faintly against the fog, their outlines rippling like candlelight. Then I noticed something strange. None of them had faces. Their helmets cast shadows where their eyes should have been. Just empty voids staring forward, expressionless. And then one of them stopped. He turned slowly, the motion deliberate and heavy, like every muscle was resisting. His head lifted, and though his face was still hidden by shadow, I felt his eyes lock onto mine. My breath caught in my throat. He raised his hand, pointing directly at me. Before I could react, the rest of the soldiers turned too, every single one of them, and began marching toward the bunker. I stumbled back, my flashlight slipping from my hand. The beam spun wildly, cutting across the fog. For a moment, it illuminated their faces. They weren't blank anymore. Each one was twisted in agony, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with pain. It was like they were frozen in the last moments of their lives. The air vibrated with a low hum, a sound that wasn't quite thunder but deeper, heavier. Then came the faint echo of gunfire, not from the present, but from somewhere else. A battle was replaying around me, invisible but deafening. I heard shouting in a dozen languages, the sharp whistle of bullets, the heavy thud of bodies hitting the ground. The soldiers in the fog were moving faster now, closing in. Their boots left no footprints. Their weapons hung limply, but their eyes, those empty, burning eyes, stayed fixed on me. Panicking, I grabbed the camera and ran. My boots sank into the wet soil as I sprinted across the field. Behind me, I could hear them, not chasing, not running, just marching. Steady, relentless. When I reached the stone monument, I turned back. The field was empty again. The fog had settled. The whispers were gone. Only the sound of my own breathing filled the air. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it all. But then, from somewhere deep in the fog, I saw a single figure still standing. It was the soldier who'd pointed at me. Unlike the others, his face was clear now. Dirt streaked his cheek, and blood stained the collar of his uniform. His eyes were hollow but human, filled with exhaustion and sorrow. He raised his hand again, but this time not to point. He saluted, slowly, respectfully, and then, as if the fog itself swallowed him, he vanished. I stood frozen for what felt like hours, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me. The battlefield was quiet once more, but I could feel the energy of it, the heaviness of countless souls who had died fighting a war that no one remembered. When I checked my camera footage later, the screen glitched constantly. Static filled most of the recording, but there was one clear frame, just one, showing the line of soldiers marching through the fog. And in the very center of the image was Elias Ward, his face unmistakable. He was looking straight into the lens, as if he knew I'd be watching. Beneath his ghostly figure, scratched faintly into the dirt, were two words that I hadn't noticed before. Find us. That night I realized something horrifying. This wasn't a haunting born from fear, it was a call for help from the forgotten dead. And I was the only one who had answered. The Trench of Echoes. After witnessing the marching soldiers, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Find us. They played in my head like a broken record. Elias Ward, the man whose name I found on the dog tag, wasn't just haunting that field. He was leading me somewhere. That night I set up camp near the monument again. My camera battery had mysteriously recharged even though I hadn't plugged it in. The equipment that glitched the night before now worked perfectly, almost as if something wanted me to keep filming. The fog rolled in thick and fast, swallowing the field in silver mist. I switched on my recorder and whispered into the microphone. Elias, I'm here. Tell me what you want me to find. The wind stirred, carrying faint whispers, softer than before but somehow closer, surrounding me. I followed the sound toward the center of the battlefield, where the grass gave way to uneven ground. The soil looked disturbed, darker than the rest, like something had been buried there long ago. Then I saw it, a narrow crack in the earth, barely visible under the fog. I knelt down and realized it wasn't just a crack, it was the entrance to an old trench. The wood lining its walls was rotted, and the smell of damp earth filled the air. I hesitated for a moment, staring into the darkness below, and then climbed down carefully, flashlight in hand. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath came out in pale clouds as I moved deeper, the walls closing in around me. Every step I took echoed down the trench. Crunch, 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 until I wasn't sure if the sound was mine anymore. Sometimes it felt like footsteps were following right behind me, matching my pace perfectly. I stopped and turned my light back. Nothing. But when I looked forward again, something shimmered in the darkness, a faint blue glow hovering just above the ground. I walked closer, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The light flickered, revealing faint outlines. Helmets, rifles, scattered bones still wearing tattered uniforms. There were bodies here, dozens of them, forgotten, buried by time itself. I crouched beside one, brushing the dirt away from its chest. A rusted emblem caught the light, the same one I'd seen on Elias Ward S-tag. My stomach twisted, and then I heard it again, whispers, but this time they weren't carried by the wind. They came from all around me. Too many, trapped, forgotten. We waited for orders. The ground buried us alive. The voices grew louder, overlapping, filling every corner of the trench. My flashlight flickered violently. I backed up against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Suddenly, the earth trembled. A deep rumble that made dirt and stones rain from above. The sound of gunfire echoed faintly in the distance, followed by screams, explosions, and the metallic clatter of rifles. It was happening again. The battlefield was waking up. I turned to climb out, but the trench had changed. The path I'd come from was gone. In its place, more walls, more turns, stretching endlessly. I was trapped in a maze that hadn't existed a moment ago. Then, through the chaos, I heard a voice. A single voice cutting through the noise. "Down here!" It was clear, human, and familiar. Elias. I followed it deeper into the trench, turning corner after corner until I reached a collapsed section. A faint light glowed beneath the debris. Dropping to my knees, I pushed the dirt aside, uncovering a rusted tin box. Inside was a faded photo of a young soldier, Elias Ward. Behind him stood a small group of men, smiling, unaware of the horror awaiting them. On the back of the photo, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "They left us here." My chest tightened. The whispers quieted, replaced by a heavy silence, the kind that feels alive. Then I heard movement again, soft, slow footsteps approaching from behind. I turned, expecting to see nothing, but standing just a few feet away was Elias. He wasn't like the others. Not a distant figure, not a shadow. His form was solid, detailed. His face was pale, dirt-streaked, eyes filled with pain. He looked directly at me. "You found us," he said quietly. "But it's not over. They need to know." "Who needs to know?" I asked, my voice trembling. He stepped closer. "The truth. The world forgot what happened here. They buried us, covered the field, erased the records. We were never meant to be remembered." Before I could respond, the trench shuddered violently again, the air filled with the screams of unseen soldiers. Elias reached out, his hand cold as ice. "Help us tell the story," he whispered, "or we'll never rest." And just like that, he vanished, his form dissolving into a swirl of dust and light. The whispers stopped. The air fell silent once more. When I finally climbed out of the trench, dawn was breaking over the field. The fog had lifted completely, and for the first time, the battlefield looked peaceful. But I knew what I'd seen wasn't peace. It was resignation. The ghosts had spoken, and I had their message. They didn't want vengeance. They wanted remembrance. And now, it was my responsibility to give it to them, a soldier's plea. I couldn't leave Raven's Hollow after that night. Every time I tried to pack my equipment, I'd hear echoes, faint murmurs drifting through the air like broken radio transmissions from another time. Elias's final words haunted me. "Help us tell the story, or we'll never rest." It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was obligation. Something deep inside me felt tied to this place now, as if the dead had chosen me to be their voice. I spent the morning reviewing the footage from the trench. Most of it was static and flickers of light, but there was one moment, just a few seconds long, that froze my blood. The camera, facing the far end of the trench, had captured a clear image of Elias standing behind me. He wasn't translucent or faded. He looked alive. His lips were moving, though no sound came through. When I slowed the video and read them carefully, I realized what he'd said. "We were betrayed." That one sentence shattered everything I thought I knew. This wasn't just about ghosts lingering from war. This was about something that happened here, something dark enough to chain them to this field forever. That night, I returned to the site where I'd found the photo box. I brought a lantern, my recorder, and a single question. "Elias," I called into the darkness, "who betrayed you?" The wind was still. The air didn't move. And then, from somewhere deep in the fog, came a single word. Command. The ground beneath me seemed to hum with energy. I turned on the recorder, my voice shaking. "You mean, your own side?" The reply came instantly. Overlapping voices this time, dozens of them all whispering in pain. "They left us. No reinforcements. No retreat. Forgotten." My lantern flickered, and a shadow passed across the field. I turned slowly, and there he was again. Elias. His figure clearer than ever, standing a few meters away, his rifle slung over his shoulder, uniform shredded, but his posture firm, proud. He spoke in a calm but broken tone. We were ordered to hold this line for 48 hours. Supplies ran out on the second day. We waited for orders, waited for help that never came. Command pulled back and left us here. He looked past me toward the horizon, where the morning sun had once risen over chaos. We fought until the last bullet, and when that was gone, he paused, voice cracking. We fought with our hands. I swallowed hard. How did you die, Elias? He turned back to me slowly, his eyes hollow but glistening with the faintest trace of humanity. I didn't die right away. The trench collapsed after the final barrage. The men screamed for hours. Some prayed, some cursed. I listened until there was no one left. He lifted his hand and pointed toward the ground beneath us. They're all still here. I looked down at the soil, dark, soft, alive with restless energy. My stomach turned as realization hit me. I'd been walking across their grave the entire time. Elias, I whispered, my voice barely audible. What do you want me to do? He stepped closer. For the first time, his expression softened. Tell them we existed. Show them what they buried. Let the world remember our names. Then, almost in a whisper meant only for me, he added, and set us free. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, suffocating. The fog thickened around us, and from the field rose dozens of other figures. Soldiers, each in the same tattered uniforms, their faces drawn, their eyes burning faintly in the mist. They surrounded me silently. The sound of distant gunfire began again, echoing through time. The ground trembled beneath my feet. My camera, still recording, started glitching as if struggling to process what it was seeing. Elias raised his arm, saluting me. The others followed in unison. The sight made my throat tighten. Hundreds of lost souls standing at attention, waiting for someone to acknowledge them. Promise me, Elias said softly. You'll tell it right. I promise, I whispered. The wind stirred again, stronger this time, carrying their voices like a wave of sorrow and relief. The figures began to fade, one by one, dissolving into the mist until only Elias remained. He gave me a faint smile, the first and last I'd ever see. Then, maybe, we can finally go home. And with that, he was gone. The fog cleared completely, leaving the field silent and still. I fell to my knees, staring at the empty space where they'd stood moments ago. My hands trembled as I looked down at the ground. The soil shimmered faintly, as if lit from beneath, before settling back into its natural lifeless brown. When I reviewed the footage later, something incredible happened. For the first time, the audio was clear. I heard Elias's voice, steady and haunting. Promise me. You'll tell it right. And then, faintly beneath it, hundreds of voices whispered together. Remember us. I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. I had my answer. They weren't haunting the battlefield. They were guarding their truth. And now I carried the burden of telling it. The relic beneath the soil. For days after Elias and the others vanished, I couldn't think about anything else. Their voices, that final plea, remember us, echoed in every quiet moment. I had promised to tell their story, but I didn't know where to begin. There were no official records of the Raven's Hollow unit. No archives, no mention of Elias Ward or his men in any war document I could find. It was as if history had erased them completely. But something inside me knew. If I wanted the truth, it wasn't buried in a book. It was buried right here, beneath my feet. So I went back to the field one last time. The morning was gray and silent. The fog hung low, heavy and unmoving, like the world was holding its breath. I brought a shovel, my camera, and a small metal detector I'd borrowed from a local historian. I started where Elias had appeared the night before, at the heart of the field. The ground was softer there, the soil darker and rich with decay. The detector gave faint beeps, but nothing significant. I kept digging anyway, inch by inch, the shovel biting through wet earth. After what felt like hours, I hit something solid. A dull clank echoed through the still air. I knelt and brushed away the dirt with my hands until the edge of a metal box appeared. It was old, rusted but intact. I lifted it carefully, my hands trembling, and placed it beside me. On the lid, faintly engraved, were the initials E.W. Elias Ward. The latch was nearly fused shut, but with a little effort it cracked open. Inside, wrapped in brittle fabric, were personal belongings. Small pieces of forgotten lives. There was a pocket watch, stopped forever at 3:17. A folded letter, its ink smudged but still readable. And beneath it all, a locket. Tarnished, dull, but still holding a faint glimmer under the light. I opened it carefully and froze. Inside was a small photograph of a woman and a child. The woman's smile was faint, her eyes full of warmth. On the opposite side of the locket was an inscription, barely visible through the grime. For Elias, come home to us. My throat tightened. This wasn't he just a soldier, Eve's trinket. It was his tether to the world he'd lost, the reason he couldn't let go. I turned my camera toward the box and whispered, Elias, is this what you wanted me to find? The wind picked up suddenly, strong and sharp, whipping across the field. The grass swayed violently as if the earth itself had taken a deep breath. Then I heard it, his voice. You found it. I froze. The voice wasn't T coming from around me. It was coming from the locket in my hand. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, trembling, broken, filled with gratitude. She never knew what happened. Tell her story, too. She, I whispered, your wife? But the wind had already shifted. The air grew colder. A familiar hum filled the silence, the same low vibration that always came before something otherworldly stirred. I turned slowly, and there, in the distance, standing just beyond the fog, were the soldiers again. But this time, they weren't marching. They stood in formation, still, calm, at peace. Their faces were no longer twisted in pain. The hollowness was gone. I could see faint smiles, small, almost imperceptible expressions of relief. Elias stood at the front, his uniform cleaner now, his rifle slung across his back with pride. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, of thanks. The relic binds us, his voice echoed softly. You've set us free. The air around the box began to shimmer faintly, the soil beneath it glowing with a soft golden hue. The wind circled me gently, lifting a few strands of grass and scattering the dirt I had dug. The light grew brighter until I had to shield my eyes. And then, silence. When I looked again, the soldiers were gone. The field was still. The fog began to lift, revealing a sky streaked with soft orange light. Morning was breaking. I looked down at the relics once more. The watch, the letter, the locket. They no longer looked dull or lifeless. They felt lighter, as if the weight they carried had finally been lifted. I placed them back into the box, closed the lid, and whispered, You're home now. Before I left, I buried the box beneath the monument where the names of the forgotten were carved. I added one more with my knife, Elias Ward, scratched into the stone just below the others. When I stood up, a single breeze brushed past me. Soft, warm, almost like a sigh. And for the first time since I'd arrived, the air of Raven's Hollow didn't feel haunted. It felt peaceful. The night of the unending battle. I thought it was over. After burying the relic box beneath the monument, I truly believed I had brought peace to the soldiers of Raven's Hollow. The fog lifted, the air felt lighter, and for the first time in days I felt like I could finally breathe. But I was wrong. What I didn't understand then was that the dead may rest. But history itself does not. That night, I stayed in a small inn in the nearby village, an old stone building with creaky floors and a single window that faced the distant hills. From there, I could still see the faint outline of the battlefield under the moonlight. It was quiet, calm, too calm. I was reviewing my footage, preparing to send everything to the production team, when something strange happened. My laptop screen flickered. Static, just like before. Then, the video I'd recorded of the soldiers began to play on its own. But it wasn't the same footage. The image had changed. The field was no longer empty. It was alive with motion. Smoke, fire, explosions. The sounds of war filled the speakers so vividly it made the walls tremble. My hands froze over the keyboard. I couldn't look away. The recording showed hundreds of men charging through the mist, shouting commands, gunfire cracking through the night, and right in the middle of it, Elias Ward. Not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a living, breathing soldier. His face streaked with mud, his eyes burning with determination. I realized what I was seeing wasn't just a recording. It was a memory. Then, suddenly, the sound of war wasn't just coming from my laptop anymore. It was coming from outside. At first, I thought it was thunder, but when I looked out the window, my blood ran cold. The entire horizon glowed red. The air shimmered with heat, and rising from the mist that had returned to the battlefield were flashes. Gunfire, artillery bursts, the flicker of flames. Raven's Hollow was alive again. I grabbed my camera and rushed outside. The night air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of smoke and iron. The closer I got to the field, the louder it became. Screams, shouts, and the thunder of marching boots echoing through the valley. When I reached the monument, I stopped dead in my tracks. The ground was shaking. The field before me was no longer empty. It was a war zone. Spectral soldiers in faded uniforms charged through the smoke, their faces half burned, their eyes glowing faintly like embers. Tanks made of shadow rolled across the soil, vanishing and reappearing with every flash of ghostly light. It wasn't chaos. It was repetition. The battle that had ended decades ago was playing out again, trapped in time. I lifted my camera, but it refused to focus. The lens fogged over as if rejecting the image. Then I heard a familiar voice above the noise, strong, clear, commanding. "Hold the line, Elias." I turned toward the sound and saw him standing at the trench's edge, shouting orders to his men. He looked alive again. Not a ghost, not a memory, but present. His rifle gleamed under the red glow. I stumbled forward, shouting his name. "Elias, it's me. You're free. You don't have to fight anymore." But he didn't hear me. Or maybe he couldn't. He turned, firing into the fog where shadowy figures advanced. Bullets that didn't exist tore through phantoms that weren't real. It was history looping endlessly, a wound the earth refused to let heal. I tried to reach him, pushing through the mist, but the deeper I went, the heavier the air became. My ears rang, my vision blurred, and then, suddenly, everything went silent. The battlefield froze. Every soldier, every shadow, every spark of flame, motionless. Elias turned slowly toward me. This time, he saw me. His expression softened and he lowered his weapon. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I came to help," I whispered. "You said you wanted the world to know." He nodded slowly. "And you did. But the story isn't done yet." The air rippled around us, and for a split second, I saw something behind him. A massive pit, filled with helmets, weapons, and bones. The true cost of the battle, hidden deep beneath the soil. "They never found them all," Elias said. "The ones still missing, they're still fighting." And with that, the world erupted again. Gunfire, screams, the deafening roar of war filling the night. The fog closed in around me until everything went white. When I opened my eyes, it was dawn. The battlefield was silent once more. Smoke rose faintly from the ground, though nothing had burned. My camera lay beside me, covered in dew. I replayed the footage later. But all it showed was darkness. No battle, no soldiers, no Elias. Just the sound of the wind. Yet, when I listened closely, really closely, I could hear it. Faint but undeniable. The rhythmic echo of boots marching through the fog. The battle hadn't ended. Not truly. The ghosts of war were still fighting. Not for victory, but for remembrance. Leaving the dead behind. The morning after the battle, I stood at the edge of Raven's Hollow once again. The mist had cleared, but the air still felt heavy, like the echoes of last night were clinging to every blade of grass, every drop of dew. The world was quiet, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was still watching. My body ached, my mind felt fractured, and I hadn't slept a second. The images of Elias and his men, the screams, the fire, they wouldn't leave me. But there was something else that haunted me even more. His last words. The ones still missing. They're still fighting. I couldn't just walk away after that, so I began searching again. Not for ghosts this time, but for proof. At the local archives, I met an elderly historian named Margaret. She had studied the battles of this region for decades. When I told her about the Raven's Hollow Regiment, her eyes widened. "You shouldn't know that name," she said quietly. "That battalion was erased from every record after the war. They went missing in action. All of them. Officially, they never existed." She led me to a storage room full of old maps and military logs. One map in particular caught my eye. A faded chart showing trench lines and artillery positions. Right where Raven's Hollow now stood, there was a note scribbled in the margin. "Unrecovered remains. Site sealed under emergency order." Unrecovered remains. My heart pounded. That pit Elias showed me. It wasn't a vision. It was real. I thanked Margaret and drove straight back to the field. The morning light was golden, but it couldn't warm the chill running through me. I knew exactly where to dig. Near the monument, just beyond where I'd buried the relic box. I pushed my shovel into the ground. The soil here was different, heavier, almost oily. After just a few minutes, I uncovered fragments, rusted dog tags, torn fabric, and a broken bayonet. And then, bones. Human bones. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a battlefield, it was a graveyard. Hundreds, maybe thousands, never found, never buried with honor. The soldiers hadn't been haunting the field out of malice. They were trapped, waiting for someone to find them, to remember them, to bring them home. I sat back, shaking, and whispered, "Elias." I found them. The wind shifted. The grass rustled softly like a whispering crowd. And then, faintly, I heard his voice one last time. "Now, you can leave." The ground beneath me trembled, not violently, just enough to make me steady myself. The air grew warmer, and for a moment, a faint golden light rose from the soil, flickering like a candle flame before fading into the dawn. They were gone. Truly gone. I called the local authorities that same day. When the excavation began, the truth spread fast. Remains from an unmarked battleground, soldiers long forgotten, finally discovered. The site became a memorial. Families from across the country came to lay flowers, whisper prayers, and honor the names that were never spoken in history books. And among those names, engraved on a new black granite slab, was Captain Elias Ward. Months later, I returned to Raven's Hollow for one final visit. The place was different now. Peaceful, almost serene. Birds nested in the tall grass. The monument stood clean and bright, and for the first time, the air smelled of life, not death. I set my camera on the ground and recorded my last entry. "Some stories," I said, "aren't meant to be scary. Some are meant to be remembered. The ghosts of war don't haunt us because they're angry. They haunt us because they don't want to be forgotten. Every name left off a page, every soldier buried in silence. That's where the real horror lies. In being erased." I paused, feeling the breeze brush against my cheek, soft, almost human. "Elias," I whispered, looking at the horizon. "You're not forgotten anymore." I turned off the camera, packed my gear, and started walking away. The sky above was streaked with gold, the same color as the light I'd seen rise from the soil. And just before I reached the edge of the field, I heard one final sound behind me. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The rhythmic march of boots. Slow, steady, fading into the wind. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to, because I knew, at last, they were marching home.